This video is over Lesson 8 in Module 3 for Eureka Math Level 7. Strategies to determine unknown angle measures. This is the alternate lesson. So we are going to work out the example problems here and go through the questions and talk about everything that we're seeing here. So in question 1, it says that we have a right angle. A right angle means 90 degrees. And it says to draw a tape diagram to represent the angle relationship, then determine the value of x. Okay, well, if we're going to draw the tape diagram, we're going to have two things here. We're going to have x and 33. And together, it makes 90. So we've got to figure out what x is. Okay? We talked in the previous lesson about setting up equations to find our missing pieces. Okay, so we know that together, these two add together, okay, x plus 33 added equals 90 degrees. Okay. And since we have a one-step equation, we are going to have to do the inverse, which is the inverse of plus 33 is minus 33, and we do that to both sides to keep things equal. Okay. That means that we're still left with x, because 33 minus 33 is 0, and well, x plus 0 is just x. And then we have 90 minus 33, which is 57. So the value of x is 57. Not exactly sure why, but they broke that into part B, which we did. Again, we wrote x plus 33 equals 90, and we found that x was 57. So we're going to use this to check our solution. So we're going to replace x with 57. And if we add these together, we do get 90. So we have a true statement. So 57 is our answer. For part C, it says, what is the measure of angle DAC? Well, if you look back on here, DAC, so angle DAC was x degrees, which means angle DAC is 57 degrees. Right. Number 2, we have a straight angle. And straight angles, remember, equal 180 degrees. So if we draw a tape diagram here to represent this, I have 45 and I have 2x. And together this makes 180 degrees. We have to figure out what the value of x would be for this situation. I'm going to also assume that it says write the equation, yes. Okay, write the equation for this. Well, in that case, we'll kind of cross this part out. We'll use this. We'll write the equation. So here's our tape diagram that represents this. So we're going to add these two things together, and they're going to equal 180 degrees. Okay. So again, we have 45 plus 2x equals 180 degrees. In the previous lesson, we talked about this being a two-step equation. Okay? When you're looking at two-step equations, okay, there's going to be two things that you're doing. Okay? The first thing is, okay, the inverse of the number without the variable. Okay, so in this case, the number without a variable is 45, because we're looking on the side that has the variable with it. So if I have a positive 45, the opposite of a positive would be to subtract it. Okay, I want to turn this into 0. So how do I go from 45 to 0? I subtract 45. Well, I'm going to subtract 45 from the other side as well. And that gives me 2x is equal to 135. Okay. Secondly, we're going to do the number with the variable. Okay. In the first step, typically you're going to add or subtract. In the second step, you're either going to multiply or divide. Okay. In this case, we're going to have to divide to eliminate that 2. So when we divide both sides by 2, 2x divided by 2 is 1x, or just x. And then when we take 135 divided by 2, okay, and it's acceptable right here to use a calculator. Okay, we're going to have 135 divided by 2, which is 67.5. Okay, so 67.5 is x. And so when we go back in here to check and see if we have the right solution, which just means answer. Okay. Well, if I take 2 times 67.5, that gives me 135. So 45 plus 135. And if I take 135 plus 45, I get 180. 180 equals 180, so we do have a correct solution. Okay. It says, what is the measure of DAC? Well, DAC is 2x. So DAC equals 2x, okay, which means 2 times 67.5. So angle DAC, okay, 67.5 times 2 is 135 degrees. All right, now let's look at question number 3. Just consider the diagrams. So we have A, B, C, and D. And which diagram shows supplementary angles? Okay, remember, supplementary angles, okay, we have 2 angles that equal 180. Okay. 2 angles equals 180. So anything that is would either not be 180 degrees or that is more than 2 angles would not be considered supplementary. So we could mark off A because that's 3 angles. Even though if you took these and added them together, it would equal 180 degrees. A has 3 angles. We're only looking for 2 angles. Okay, B, well, 125 plus 55. Well, 5 added here is 130 plus 50 is 180. So I have 180, okay, so B would work. Well, C, I have 155 plus 20, which would be 175. Well, they don't equal 180, so it's not C. D, 140 plus 40 is 180, so D would work. Okay. B and D show supplementary angles. Okay. Because they show 2 angles that have a sum of 180 degrees. Okay, again, it's got to be 2 angles and 2 angles only. They have to add up to exactly 180 degrees. Okay, if they don't add up to 180, they're not supplementary. If they're not, if it's more than 2 angles, then we have not supplementary angles. Okay. On the next page, part B kind of follows along with this. It says, which diagrams do not show supplementary angles? Well, A is not supplementary because there are 3 angles instead of 2. There are 3 angles that sum to 180 instead of 2 angles. C is not supplementary because the sum of the angles is not 180 degrees. A is because there's 3 angles. C is because they are not 180. And that's the simplified version there. Okay. Part 4, it wants us to draw a tape diagram here. Well, in this tape diagram, I have x, and then I have 4x. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So I want to make these boxes here on those pluses. And then I also have plus 27.5 and plus 10.5. And all together, this makes 180 degrees. Here it wants us to write an equation for the angle relationship. Well, if I'm going to add all these up, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's all these terms here. However, we're just going to use these. I have x plus 27.5 plus 4x plus 10.5. And we know they're supplementary, so that means they equal 180 degrees. Now, I don't want you to get too worried about, oh my gosh, there's so much here. Don't worry about the equals 180 first. First thing you do is simplify, just like we did in our previous topic, where we had to distribute and combine like terms. Well, here there's no distributing, it's just combining like terms. So I have x and 4x, which equals 5x. And 27.5 and 10.5, which equals 38. This is a much easier equation to work with, because now we're just going to do step 1, which is number without a variable, which we're going to add or subtract. And since we have a plus 38, that means we're going to subtract 38 from both sides. 38 minus 38 is 0, and 0 plus 5x is 5x. And then 180 minus 38 is 142. And the second thing we're going to do is the number with the variable. We're going to multiply or divide. In this case, because we're already multiplying 5 times x, the inverse of that would be to divide by 5. And when we divide by 5, we take 142 divided by 5 and get 28.4. So x equals 28.4. So now that we know that x is 28.4, we want to know the measures of angles JKL. So JKL, okay, is x plus 27.5. And angle XYZ is 4x plus 10.5. So let's start with JKL. We know what x is, so we're going to replace x with our solution, not equals, okay, plus 27.5. And when we add those two together, okay, take 27.5 plus 28.4, we get an answer of 55.9 degrees for angle JKL. Since we know x, again, we're going to replace x, well, this is multiplying with 28.4. And we're going to multiply. Well, 4 times 24, and you can use your calculator, it's 113.6. And 113.6 plus 10.5 is 124.1 degrees. So angle XYZ is 124.1. When you're solving the equations, remember your 2 steps. Okay? If you haven't already, it would be a good idea to write these down. So if you need to pause the video for a second so that you can write that down, go right ahead. This works once you get it to this step right here. Before then, okay, distribute and combine like terms. Once you get to this right here, here are your 2 steps. Okay, in our last question, we have Sarah and Logan. Says the 3 angles have measures that sum to 110 degrees. Sarah and Logan solved for x using different approaches. Okay, so we're going to look at the work. Okay, so they both start out by adding all 3 angles and setting it equal to 110. And they combined their like terms. Okay. Then they both went ahead and got rid of that non-variable number by subtracting 42, since it says plus 42. And they both ended up with 1/3 x equals 68. What's different here is they did the same thing, they just wrote it differently. Okay, so for part A, okay, what do they do differently? Well, we talked about dividing if you're multiplying, right? So 1/3 x means 1/3 times x. So in order to solve this, we would have to divide by 1/3. Well, dividing by a fraction, we just say multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3/1, or simply just 3. Okay, so what did they do differently? They did the same thing, we just call them different things, sort of. Okay, Sarah showed multiplying by the reciprocal. Logan showed dividing by the coefficient. Okay, and the reciprocal of the coefficient. Okay. So they did the same thing. They just approached it, wrote it a different way. Because even though Logan wrote divided by 1/3, he's still going to have to go through and multiply by the reciprocal in order to figure this out. However, we also know that anything divided by itself is just 1. So 1/3 x divided by 1/3 is just 1x. Okay. And part B says whose work is correct? Well, we just talked about, they did the same thing. They just showed it a different way. Okay, both are correct. Why? Okay, they did the same work, just showed how they, that's not right. Just showed in their work differently. And they both had the same answer. They both had the correct answer. Okay? They just didn't quite describe their work the exact same way. Okay? What I need us to make sure that we're aware of as we're working through these problems and these kinds of problems is to make sure we have these two steps. Okay? Kind of, if you want to say before here, okay, we could say distribute, combine like terms, and then do these two steps. Okay? Sometimes you're not going to have both of these steps. Sometimes you will have both of them. Okay? But whatever work it is that you need to do, please make sure that you are getting that done.